My name is Elise Harper, and I was 31 the year a single sealed folder destroyed the illusion of my perfect family. My grandmother turned 80 on a rainy Sunday in November. She baked her own birthday cake, vanilla sponge, buttercream frosting, tiny hand-piped roses around the edges, because she still believed birthdays deserved beauty, even when nobody else did. She set the dining table for 9 people. 9 plates, 9 forks, 9 cloth napkins, folded into triangles the way she'd done every Thanksgiving since before I was born. No one came. My mother and stepfather were in Napa Valley drinking wine beside a fireplace they posted all over Facebook. My older brother sent a text at 6:11 p.m. "Happy birthday, Nana. Crazy busy. Love you." That was it. I drove 4 hours after finishing a double shift in Boston and found my grandmother sitting alone at the table with melted candles buried in frosting wax. The ice cream had turned to soup. The coffee was cold, and she looked at me with the saddest smile I had ever seen. You remembered. I sang happy birthday to her twice, because halfway through the first song, she forgot it was her birthday and started apologizing for the mess. The next morning, while I was washing dishes in her kitchen, 2 strangers arrived at the front door carrying a sealed manila envelope with my grandmother's signature across the flap. What happened after I opened it shattered my family forever. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet people stop pretending, family secrets don't stay buried, and dignity always has the final word. If stories about protecting the people everyone else overlooks mean something to you, subscribe and stay until the end. Because this one ends at a closing table with a sentence that changed everything. That night still lives inside me. I left Boston at 4:30 wearing hospital scrubs under my coat and carrying a grocery store bouquet that cost $14.99 because it was all I could afford that week. By the time I reached Pine Hollow, the roads were slick with rain, and the old maple trees along Willow Creek Road bent over the pavement like they were trying to hide the town from the rest of the world. Her porch light was on. Every other window was dark. Inside, the dining room looked like a photograph nobody wanted to admit was sad. The birthday cake sat untouched in the center of the table. The candles had burned so low they'd melted directly into the frosting. My grandmother, Eleanor Harper, sat in her chair, wearing a pale blue cardigan, with her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, gone completely cold. "Elise," she said softly. Then her forehead creased. Wait, was I expecting company? My throat tightened. "It's your birthday, Grandma." "Oh," she said. She looked down at the cake like she was seeing it for the first time. "I thought maybe I'd baked it for church." I set the flowers beside the sink and cut us both slices. We ate cake straight from our fingers because neither of us had the energy to look for forks. At one point, she laughed because frosting got on my nose. 10 minutes later, she asked where everyone was. At 11 p.m., I helped her upstairs to bed. She weighed almost nothing. As I pulled the quilt over her shoulders, she caught my wrist suddenly. Her eyes sharpened. Not confused, not foggy, sharp. "They think I don't know what they're doing," she whispered. I leaned closer, but she was already asleep. I should explain something about my family. The Harpers were the kind of wealthy suburban family that cared deeply about appearances. My mother Celeste chaired charity galas and spoke in that syrupy, polished voice women use when they've spent decades pretending to be kind. My stepfather Richard was a financial advisor who referred to golf as client development. My brother Mason owned a luxury home renovation company that was always one bad quarter away from collapsing. And me? I was the disappointment, the practical daughter, the one who worked in elder care administration and spent evenings studying for nursing certifications, while everyone else talked investments over expensive wine. My family called me the paperwork girl. Like handling legal forms and medical directives somehow made me less ambitious than people who inherited country club memberships. But my grandmother never treated me that way. Eleanor Harper taught me how to read contracts before I could legally drink. She taught me how to balance a checkbook, how to spot manipulation, how to recognize when someone smiles with their mouth but not their eyes. When I was 22 and my mother refused to co-sign my apartment lease because she said I needed more discipline, Eleanor signed it without hesitation. "This family confuses obedience with love," she told me once. "Never make that mistake." At midnight I wandered downstairs for water and noticed something strange. Tucked behind a framed family photo on the hallway table was a realtor's business card. Melissa Crane, Crane and Associates Realty. On the back, handwritten in blue ink. Quick sale possible. Estimated value, $725K. My stomach tightened. I slipped the card back exactly where I found it. The next morning I was taking out the trash when I saw it. A realtor lockbox, attached to the gas pipe beside the house, hidden behind the hydrangea bushes. I froze. Then I went back inside and started searching. 3 weeks of unopened mail sat stacked on the kitchen counter. Inside one envelope was a printed property listing marked "Off-Market Preliminary Sale." Another contained a purchase agreement already filled out. Buyer, Ashford Property Investments LLC. Cash purchase, 30-day close. Seller representative, Mason Harper. My brother. I sat on the kitchen floor with papers spread around me like broken glass. The house was already being sold, and my grandmother either didn't know or nobody cared whether she did. That's when the knock came. 2 strangers stood outside. A woman around 60 with silver hair and a leather briefcase, and a younger man carrying a notary seal. "Are you Elise Harper?" the woman asked. "Yes. My name is Judith Keller. Your grandmother retained my office 16 months ago." She handed me a thick sealed manila folder. My grandmother's signature stretched across the flap in careful blue ink. She instructed us to give this to you personally, when the time came. "What time?" Judith glanced toward the living room where Eleanor slept in her recliner. "The moment they tried to take the house." Then she handed me her business card. "And Elise?" "Yes, do not discuss that folder with your family before speaking to me." They walked away before I could ask another question. I stood in the doorway holding the envelope while my pulse hammered in my ears. Inside was everything. A trust agreement, a durable power of attorney, recorded property deeds, medical evaluations, witness statements, and clipped to the front a handwritten note from my grandmother. "Elise, if you're reading this, they've started. Everything you need is here. I'm sorry it had to become your responsibility, but you were the only one I trusted to protect this house after I couldn't protect it myself. Love always, Grandma." I read it 4 times. Then I opened the trust documents. 16 months earlier, while still fully competent, Eleanor Harper had transferred ownership of her house into a living trust. She named herself acting trustee while capable. And me? Successor trustee. Not my mother, not Mason, me. The attached neurologist evaluation confirmed she had full legal capacity when she signed every document, which meant something devastating. She knew her memory was slipping, and before anyone else realized it, she had already prepared for war. That evening I called my mother. At first she sounded cheerful, then I mentioned the lockbox. Silence. A long one. "Elise," she finally sighed, "your grandmother cannot manage this property anymore. Mason found a wonderful assisted living facility, and she doesn't know the house is being sold. She has dementia. She knows strangers are walking through her kitchen." My mother's voice hardened instantly. "Mason's business is struggling. The sale helps everyone." Everyone. Such a dangerous word. "She won't even remember the house in 6 months, my mother added coldly. I stared at the wall, then answered quietly, "Good thing somebody remembers." and I hung up. The next day, Judith explained the rest. My grandmother had predicted everything. She told me your mother would treat the house like inventory the second Eleanor became vulnerable, Judith said calmly. She specifically chose you because she believed you would fight when everyone else got practical. Judith laid the documents out one by one. The trust owned the house, legally, which meant nobody, not my mother, not my brother, could sell it without trustee authorization. And that authorization belonged to me. Then Judith showed me something else. A newer power of attorney signed only 2 months earlier. My stepfather's name was on it. The signature trembled badly, nothing like my grandmother's original handwriting. I checked the date. My stomach dropped instantly. It had been signed during the exact week Eleanor was hospitalized after wandering onto a highway and becoming disoriented. They had placed legal papers in front of a confused 80-year-old woman during a cognitive episode, and they expected nobody to notice. But I noticed, because paperwork people always notice. The closing date was November 18th, 9 days away. Judith gave me 2 options: take them to court immediately, or walk into the closing room with the truth and let the documents destroy the sale themselves. I chose the quieter option. Sometimes silence humiliates people more effectively than screaming ever could. Over the next week, everything unraveled. Adult Protective Services opened an investigation. My mother started calling relatives, claiming I was emotionally manipulating my grandmother for money. Mason showed up furious. "If this deal dies, my company dies," he snapped. "You're selling an old woman's home to save your luxury lifestyle," I replied. "She's confused, Elise. She's confused. Not worthless." 3 days before closing, my stepfather visited alone. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the walls, like a ghost visiting his childhood. "She used to sing while cooking Sunday breakfast," he whispered. Then quietly, "I should have stopped this." "You still can." For 1 second I thought he might. Then his phone buzzed. My mother. He stood immediately and left. Cowards rarely look dramatic when they abandon people. Usually, they just look tired. The night before closing, I sat beside my grandmother while she worked on a crossword puzzle. 7 letters, she murmured. "Legal protection." "Trust," I answered. She smiled faintly and filled it in. Then she reached into her sweater pocket and handed me a folded note. "For Elise, keeper of the house." Her handwriting shook badly, but it was intentional. A final breadcrumb from someone disappearing slowly in real time. The next afternoon, we walked into the title company together. Judith, the notary, and the folder. My mother arrived dressed like she was attending brunch. Mason looked exhausted. The realtor smiled too much. The buyer looked bored. Then Judith placed the trust deed on the table. The room changed instantly. You could actually feel it happen. Like oxygen disappearing. The escrow officer read the documents carefully, then looked at the realtor. "You told us the trust had been dissolved." The realtor turned pale. Judith placed the neurologist evaluation beside it. Then the original power of attorney. Then the medical records documenting Eleanor's cognitive decline before the newer signatures were obtained. Finally, the escrow officer sat back and spoke 5 words that shattered my family permanently. "I cannot close this transaction." Silence. Absolute silence. Then chaos. My mother started crying immediately. Mason exploded. "If this falls apart, I lose everything." Judith didn't even blink. "Your financial problems are irrelevant to ownership law." My brother turned toward me with actual hatred in his eyes. "You're destroying this family." I looked at him calmly. "No," I said. You tried to sell Grandma's house while she sat alone on her birthday waiting for people who never came. Nobody spoke after that, not even my mother. The buyer walked out first, then the realtor, then the title officer voided the sale entirely. The illusion collapsed. I drove back to Willow Creek Road with the manila folder on the passenger seat beside me. The porch light was glowing when I arrived. Inside, my grandmother slept peacefully in her recliner beneath a patchwork quilt. I knelt beside her carefully. "It's done, Grandma," I whispered. "The house is safe." Her eyes opened slowly, cloudy at first, then clear. "Did you keep the dining table?" she asked softly. I laughed through tears. "Yes," she smiled. "Good girl." Then she fell asleep holding my hand. 8 weeks later, Mason filed bankruptcy. My mother quietly resigned from every charity board she served on after people in town learned what happened. Adult Protective Services substantiated financial exploitation concerns. The fraudulent power of attorney was voided. The court officially appointed me Eleanor's guardian and permanent trustee. I moved into the guest room permanently. Not because it was convenient. Because love sometimes looks like medication schedules, grocery lists, and sitting beside someone while they forget your name for the third time that afternoon. One Tuesday in spring, I baked a vanilla cake. No birthday, no occasion, just because. My grandmother took one bite and smiled. "This tastes familiar," she whispered. "It's your recipe." She nodded proudly. "Don't let anyone change it." Outside, sunlight moved through the old prism above the sink, scattering tiny rainbows across the kitchen floor. The house remained standing. The table remained standing. And so did she. For a while longer. A person's value does not disappear because their memory does. And sometimes the quietest person in the family is the only one brave enough to remember what everyone else conveniently forgets.